Welcome to the monthly Truck Stop webinar brought to you by the Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation. Truck stops are presented the second Thursday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. These webinars are open for members of MCIEF only. These webinars are presented as industry updates for information purposes only and do not qualify for state CE credits. If you're seeking CE credits, please visit our website, mcief.org, or email us at trs@mcief.org, and we'll update you on what of the CE programs that we provide. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat window. They will be answered as time allows, or most often afterwards by email, which will share the answers with everybody who is signing in for this webinar. If you experience audio problems, please send us a note, again in the chat window, or call us at 800-741-4084, and we'll attempt to correct the problems as soon as possible. These webinars also will be posted on our website later for you to review or to share with anybody in your organization or any of your insureds who you might think this will be beneficial to. Remote compliance review. This is something new. It's going to affect the insured safety fitness determination record. This is something that's coming down that we can blame on the virus here. I asked Buddy Wells from Carrier Software to be a part of this because he understands how this is happening. I only understand it's going to happen. He'll get into more detail. Buddy, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good. Welcome. You want to say a couple words about you and your history and where we're going with this, my friend?
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Appreciate the invite. Again, my name is Buddy Walls. I've been in this space for about 35 years, specialized in transportation insurance for about 30 years. I sold insurance to make a living, but my passion was always driven towards safety. And therefore, my dream finally came true. As of 2015, I retired, no longer in the insurance business, and my total focus now is on safety, assisting motor carriers in improving their CSA scores, which definitely has an impact on their insurance premiums. As safety manager of Carrier Software, my job is to conduct training webinars for our clients, showing them how to rank their drivers from worst to best so they can focus on those drivers that's really creating their problems in the CSA basic scores. And again, we appreciate you allowing us to be on the webinar today, and feel free, anybody is more than welcome to reach out to me. My phone number will be at the end of the slides here. If they have questions, comments, or need some assistance in safety, I'm here to help.
And Buddy, Carrier Software has been a big support of the foundation. I appreciate you and Greg's effort in this area and your time here spent today. Let's go through just to talk about compliance review and also what's happening because of the virus that maybe is going to affect our insureds in a drastic way very soon. FMCA provides a safety fitness determination. There are actually today 4: unsatisfactory, conditional, satisfactory, and then there's unrated. And when I do webinars, Buddy, often I ask the people, how many you think are unrated? And everybody says 10 or 15% or something like that. But right. Statistics that we find that unrating is more than we would think about. And how does the rating affect their carriers? I mean, affect the motor carrier. Buddy, I don't know when you approach a motor carrier and you deal with them far more often than I do. Are you finding that even their loads, that it's difficult to get a load if you're conditional? Unsatisfactory, basically you're out of business because you're not getting any loads, but don't you find it's even difficulty to get loads, not only insurance, if you're unsatisfactory or even unrated?
Yes, sir. The vicarious liability is becoming a major factor. And a lot of the brokers, a lot of shippers will not do business with a carrier that's got several alerts on their basics, or especially if they're unsatisfactory. They cannot stand the exposure in this industry.
And even sometimes, right, even sometimes conditional. There is a situation, though, that some agents might not be aware of, and this is something the industry, the 3PL industry and the shippers gets kind of overlooked. a lot of their contracts say we only do business if you're a satisfactory motor carrier. Well, in today's marketplace, that has to be done away with, and that's even this in the contract, it's not very well enforced. And this is why. Craig did this for us, and this is people with MC numbers. This number would be different if it was everybody with DOT numbers, but since the foundation's core business is the retail agents, insurance companies provide insurance for for-hire interstate motor carriers, most of those will have MC numbers, and that's about 270,000 motor carriers today. Only 11% are satisfactory. And so when a shipper says we're only going to do business with a satisfactory motor carrier, they're only doing business with 89% of the potential, 11% of the potential marketplace, not that 89%. And so that's an economic impact on them, and people overlook that. Conditional is about 3%. Unsatisfactory, buddy, I'm sure this won't surprise you, is less than 1%. Why? For hire, shippers won't give a load to an unsatisfactory motor carrier. Now, I think, buddy, if we went to everybody with DOT number, that unsatisfactory number would be higher for contractors, this kind of stuff. Wouldn't you think so?
I would believe, yes, sir. I think you're exactly spot on. And ironically, a lot of people look at an unrated carrier and say, "Ooh, that means they must have problems." It's not necessarily the issue. DOT just have not assigned a rating to those carriers. So,
and the key word there is time. This is why there's about 86% unrated, and that's a part of the CSA and things like that part. So why I want to focus on MC numbers is to make sure that we understand that unsatisfactory is not a problem here. Those people, basically, we don't ensure those get out of the load, but you have to do the as an underwriter and agent, you're going to find most of your insurers, particularly the marketplace that most of you focus on, which is a smaller motor carrier, will be unrated. And as Buddy pointed out, I think unrated is not bad. In fact, it would be good, Buddy. And I don't know if you agree with me or not, but if you're unrated in over 2 years, what that tells me is you haven't done something that requires a DOT officer to come visit you.
Exactly.
So that's a positive thing. We don't want them, they knock on your door and says, "I'm here to help you," right? Open your pocketbook. Right. So we'll talk about it. Let's talk about the safety rating only occurs after a compliance review. That's on-site compliance review. And Buddy, you gave us a statute here, 385.3-1. There are few because of time. There's 200. There are 700 some odd people with DOT numbers who fall under the compliance potential review. DOT officer pays attention to everybody. Although we only focus on the for-hire motor carrier, the enforcement officer looks at everybody with a DOT number. So they're only going to be able to find time to visit 2 or 3%. That's why you have full compliance review, because it takes 2 or 3 days in some cases. Does it not, Buddy, to do one?
Yes, sir. Through the years, when I was in the insurance business, I made a note to always be available if any of my clients had an on-site audit from DOT. Number one, I wanted to understand what they were looking for and how they found it, so I could better educate my customers on what to be prepared for. And therefore, through the years, I've seen some DOT audits last over a week at that facility. And it just, everything kind of comes to a screeching halt. And ironically, there were a few cases that I experienced DOT actually threatening to subpoena the cell phone towers from their drivers to prove the driver falsified their log. So you can't hide anything from DOT.
Wow. And now COVID-19. COVID-19 has affected us all. And I guess what the officers said, the idea to do a compliance review at an insured's office with all the social separation and all the suggestions would be something that can't be done. So I think this was at about, May 19th, this came out. During the current problems, the public health emergency, FMCSA will conduct remote compliance review under the statute that Buddy just referred to here, to access information and records using the same standards otherwise applicable. And Buddy, I think that is the same standards as if they were there themselves.
Correct.
FMCA will assign safety rating following a compliance review, even if no on-site review activities have been taken place. This is what alerted me to bring this up, buddy, because this is what scares me. I don't think most of our insureds aren't going to be a part of that 2-3% that gets checked. But now with this remote review here, the chances of them going to get checked is going to increase greatly. Do you not think so?
Absolutely, I agree with you. Just think of the additional work that can be completed by the same DOT officers without having to travel and waste a lot of time on the road. This will definitely increase the number of inspections as far as compliance reviews.
And also, as we find out, even in our own situation, where we save money because we aren't traveling and doing those kind of things. And so this is going to be here. And so this is a concern we have in the situation we have now. And this is why I wanted and visit with Buddy about this new regulation that's going to affect everybody. Now, there were some unrated reviews or off-site reviews already, but it did not lead to a score. It only led to maybe a possible fine or penalty or things like that, but not to the safety, not the change of the scores. Buddy provided this with us, the carrier software. These are the current reviews, and obviously they're about 5,000, and that would be what, Buddy, about 650,000 people with DOT numbers. This gets back to that number there.
Yes, very small percentage when you look at the numbers of inspections. They're not really scratching the surface on the number of motor carriers out there with DOT numbers.
And you look at the 22,000 unsatisfactory, again, I contend that will be mostly non-for-hire contracts and things like that. But when you talk about even 250,000 or so for-hire motor carriers, that 220 is a very small number, and the conditional is also. And so look at even the ratio here. You're looking at, Buddy, about 30, what? I'm doing my math in my top of my head here, about 40% are found conditional when they have a review. And so I would suggest that ratio between, you talk about here, 4,000 inspections here and 1,600 of them are conditional. That ratio of about 32% is going to hold on the remote, if not larger. Would you not think so?
I agree with you totally, absolutely, because they're going to go over the same criteria, regardless if it's on-site or remote. DOT, I tell you what, actually, it creates a lot of additional work as well on the safety department of trucking companies, because when DOT calls, they give you 48 hours to provide, and they give you the list of information and files they want to look at, and you have 48 hours to get that to them, okay? And so they're going to digest it probably more detail being off-site versus being there in the facility.
Yeah, we're going to talk about those things later. That's a good part. That's a lead to a little teaser here, because I think that those times are going to be important. And that is if they have a safety department, Buddy. I was going to stop you there because there might be
Yes.
one person on the highway, and this is what we're going to have here.
You're right.
So here's the intervention. Now, after an alert, they get a letter, the warning letter, they get an off-site desk remote that does not lead to review, but could lead to fines and penalty. Then they look at the on-site focus audit to address a problem found at the roadside inspections as a part of the basic or the crashes. Then you get the safety crash fatality triggers a compliance review on-site or remote, and roadside inspections also contribute to this, those not. So the DOT officer, when they look at the whole 600 and some odd people with DOT numbers, 260,000 with MC numbers, they got to decide who to look at. So, Buddy, you've been doing this a long time. I just have intuitively think that if you had a crash, you go on top of the list. If you have roadside violation, particularly on things they find critical, like hours of service and maybe some major maintenance problems, some out of services, you're going on that list and either get a knock on the door or a phone call. Would you not think that this is what's going to put them on that list to have an audit?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And if it's a fatality, it's a required audit regardless of who was at fault. So, a fatality could happen at any time. You had nothing to do with the crash, but they're going to be asking you questions at a motor carrier.
And so this is where we are today. So since CSA, it takes time to complete a compliance on-site review, as Buddy said, could be 3 or 4 days. More focused, unrated than full compliance review. This is because of time factors. In fact, if I recall, Buddy, I don't know if you remember this, and maybe some of the audience who's listening to this, participants will remember this, but the DOT even announced at the end of last year that they're going to do more off-site review. And this makes sense with CSA because what they were going to focus on are the things that the roadside inspection shows a problem, not everything. You know, if you have an hours of service problem and no maintenance inspection problems, why go through the 3 or 4 days to check all that out, or vice versa? So they've done more unrated reviews. But then, of course, now comes this new regulation we have where the COVID-19 is going to require, will allow a full compliance review. So I guess now when you look at that, the officer is going to say, I'm going to look at this motor carrier. Am I going to do an unrated review, or am I going to do a full compliance review? So that's what the officer is going to go through. Buddy, just a gut feeling, I think they're going to look at doing more compliance reviews than they did before as a percentage unrated review. Just human nature, would you think?
I would certainly think so. I mean, they're going to have more time to really spend on reviewing companies versus the travel time involved. So it only makes sense they're going to be able to do more reviews.
So now with remote safety audits and compliance reviews, who might get the letter requiring review within the 48 hours? That's the time frame. Insured that has significant roadside inspection violations, crashes with fatality or injuries you said are required. Also, if they haven't updated the 150, but they're still operating, that would be put that because now they become inactive, do they not? Or if they have a high ISS system score. So, Buddy, you helped me put this list together, but in your mind, this is what's going through the officer's mind when they look at a motor carrier and say, it's worthwhile to send a letter or have that phone call. Now, if you're not familiar with the ISS here, this is the inspection selection system. This is why a motor carrier gets pulled overside. And some of you have looked at that. We've talked about it in our programs. This used to be public information, but it's not now. Both Carrier Software and Central Analysis Bureau gives them, the insurance providers, both retail agents and insurance companies, their estimate of the ISS. And what it basically says, if your score is 1 to 49, it's passed. It's green, let them go through. If the score is 50 to 74, it's optional to inspect. And if it's 75 or 100 or higher to 100, then you must inspect. But the way I interpret this or have heard this is they have to inspect if that score is that high, unless there's a reason that they didn't have time to or something was more important. But most of the time when you have a score that high and there's a reason for the DOT officer to put the number, your insurance DOT number into the system. I mean, this is where it starts. And you got to realize, and one of the things that we try to preach, Buddy, is that if your insured keeps their lights burned, secure the load, use their turn signal, do not follow too close and drive within the speed limit, they're not going to have the DOT officer is not in most cases going to have a reason to put them in the computer. And when they put them in the computer is when this shows up from the roadside. As far as going through the weigh stations, if the cab looks clean, the driver looks clean, and they look like the paperwork, they're just not going to put their numbers in the computer to be inspected here. Notice it's the out of service carrier, the insured who's been put on the out of service, or a high risk carrier, or carrier with multiple basic alerts, or carriers with hours of service alert. Buddy, what do you mean by high? What do you think they mean by high risk carrier?
Through the program with CSA scores, high risk carriers are those carriers that have alerts in any one of the basic categories. And as mentioned here with the hours of service alert, if you have an hours of service alert, the rest of your basic scores could be below the threshold. However, with an hours of service alert alone, you will be 75 or above on the must inspect category.
And that's a whole different subject. We need to talk about electronic logs and how to stay compliance in the new world.
Absolutely.
Carrier with insurance or other serious violations are carriers with one basic, not hours of service, or carriers with insufficient data. This has bothered me here because it's insufficient data is, again, now there's going to do this remote. One of the reasons you might get a letter and maybe even move the off-site to a full compliance is trying to develop the data to put into the system. But this is where the ISS, this is what starts all the roadside inspections, and you need to track this, and everybody who's listening to us needs to make sure they keep this information available in their own office by using carrier software or Central Analysis Bureau to get their estimated scores and share this with their insured on an ongoing basis. Because once you get on that list, on that top list, you're pretty well going down a slippery slope that's going to be tough to get out of.
Yes, sir. And real quick on the insufficient data, that has more of an impact on your smaller carriers just because they've not had sufficient inspections to determine a score yet. And so, you know, sometimes we forget about the smaller carriers, and you have a slide here that's going to point out the numbers. But the smaller carriers are required to comply with the same rules and regulations as a carrier with 20,000 trucks. It makes no difference. You know, so a quick point I'd like to bring up, you know, in the FMCSA regs, in the first few pages, it makes a comment, who's responsible for compliance? I want to read this briefly. Compliance with the regs is generally a shared responsibility among drivers and their employers, where the driver is specifically charged with compliance. 390.11 makes the motor carrier responsible for requiring driver compliance. Every employer, every employee, including all the departments plus drivers, must be aware of the regulations. That's what the reg says. So you cannot plead ignorance here.
And by the way, just so you who are listening to when it says employee, by definition, owner-operator is an employee if they're driving the truck with your insurance DOT number on the side. So that's
Absolutely.
everybody who's driving the truck here. Now, buddy, when they get that knock on the door, that letter to do the remote, then they're going to end up having these results. So those that visit either remotely or physically, they're going to look at violations. And then a lot of those violations lead to fines. Sometimes those fines can be pretty hefty, can they not?
Absolutely. A real brief story. I had a carrier, you know, call me. They thought the safety person was doing their job and documenting, you know, the background check, something pretty simple. You know, you still have to firmly document that, and I suggest making 3 tries as a background check with the prior trucking companies for the prior 3 years. She failed to document. The fine was $196,000.
Wow.
Now, these are, you know, that could put a carrier out of business real quick.
Well, that's if they generate 20 to 30,000 net income, that's the income for 50 trucks net income. Wow. They also get 2 things, acute violations and critical violations. Those are basically paperwork there, and those violations stay now. That insured who gets an acute or critical violations, that alert stays there for a full year. So they're on that list for full years. But he gives a couple examples between the acute violations and the critical violation. Tell me how those things factor in.
Well, acute violation as an example of failure to conduct a pre-employment drug and alcohol test, or failure to conduct a random test. Make sure every driver that's active, every shop person that's got a CDL license need to be in your pool of random selection for drug and alcohol. That's an example of an acute violation. Critical violation is more of a management issue. It's a little lower on the radar screen of DOT. It's still important because they need to shore up their management procedures, rules, best practices, and you know, things like I tell every carrier I talk to, if you have a safety policy, you need to review that safety policy, make sure everyone else in your organization understands when you make changes. But if you fail to comply with your own safety policy and it ever ends up in discovery and court, you're in a world of hurts.
And then if it's full compliance, then the safety rating. If it's non-rated, that's a focus. So we were talking about either remotely or on site will be focused just on hours of service, just on maintenance or one area right here. Safety rating, if it's a full compliance rating, then they get the 3 ratings: satisfactory, conditional, unsatisfactory. These are the ones that we worry about. And then, buddy, when they get these fines and penalties and or these ratings, they have to respond to anything that they find that are violations or lead to these ratings, what, they have to do that within 15 days to appeal the fine or appeal the rating?
Yes,
That's
sir.
a short time frame.
Oh, it is. I mean, well, you have to respond within 15 days, and you must provide proof. If you're going to say that they're wrong, you're going to have to show some strong proof of why you think you're right. Okay.
Either that, or you have now instituted something to address the problem. Will that come in also into place?
Be more proactive. Create a proactive plan as a corrective action plan. Again, if you give them something in writing and they do another review on you down the road and you fail to comply with those things that you're telling DOT you are implementing, they're not going to show mercy on you.
And then if they don't do it 15 days, then it becomes permanent then until there's a new inspection or until the fine's paid. I understand sometimes the fines can be negotiated after the fact at a lower number, but it goes forward there without any kind of change. So that's a concern. Agents, make sure the insured answers this and helps with these and help them with the responses. This is something you need to be aware of, particularly smaller motor carriers who all they want to do is haul this load and let everybody get out of their hair and out of these problems, because they don't understand the consequences of these kind of visits, either now remotely, phone call, and or knock on their door. Buddy, let's talk about here again. I gave you some more stuff here. Tell me about, you already talked about some of this, but let's go through the compliance review process. You made us some information exactly what the DOT officer is looking at. You can tell us the audience, and insureds, you need to look at this stuff, or agents, you need to look at this to help the insured go through this. So let's go through this list, buddy.
Yes, sir. Proof of financial responsibility according to part 387 of the regs. You've got to show proof that you're running the minimum insurance requirements in order to run interstate, which is $750,000. DQ files.
Buddy, that would be also if they have an MCS 90 attached to the policy, would it not be?
Absolutely, MCS 90, and they must show proof that they have that on site to show that
either
MCS
certificate
90.
or ID cards or
Yes,
something like that, or the policies themselves. Okay.
DQ files. I deal with a lot of the smaller carriers. Real short example. I talked to an individual owner operator, got his authority, and he called me wanting to know what needed to be, in his DQ files, things like that. I said, well, how long have you been in business? He said, oh, about 60 days now. And I said, well, do you have a DQ file set up on yourself? He said, well, no, that only applies to other people I hire. I said, no, sir. You are an employee of your company now. So there again, you must create a DQ file for everybody, and it's time stamped. I've seen DOT through the past on audits, on a new driver especially. They'll check logs to see if they dispatched that driver before they got the results of the drug test back on a new hire. So certain things are time stamped, and you cannot undo that. It's permanently in those records. So there's a list of things in the DQ files that you need to be aware of, and it's very important because that's going to be a review, on-site audit or off-site audit. They're going to look through that review. They also have annual items that need to be reviewed annually, like an MVR as an example. Just one example of your review. A driver's got to certify tickets, accidents, things like that as an annual review. So your drug and alcohol testing records, you're going to have to prove
Let me
to
go
deal.
back, buddy.
Okay.
Folks, the foundation doesn't get any revenue for any of this kind of stuff, but you need to go to J.J. Keller, and you need to look at the driver qualification file, and it's a folder. It costs about $7 to buy one or buy a couple, three. I've actually bought some and furnished them to my smaller motor carriers who are just getting started, because that file has everything in it that the motor carrier must do to qualify a driver to drive a commercial motor vehicle. And it's worth you, retail agents, you go and talk to the insured, you will need to talk to them more than the policy. You need to talk about these kind of procedure here, because if they ever get fined, they'll get penalized. If they ever get the conditional rating, it's going to be because they didn't do the paperwork right. And if you want to keep them in your book of business, you need to help them. So I find it's worthwhile, buddy, to get a copy of those driver qualification file. You can copy those forms and all to get all that detail. Would you not suggest to get one way or the other? I just know J.J. Keller has one,
Yeah.
and I bought those copies there. Now go talk about the drug and alcohol testing record.
Yes, and you made a good point on the DQ files. You know, there's certain things that and it spells it out in the Keller. There's a lot of different carriers that provide, you know, similar files for you. The main thing is, you know, Tommy, you gave great advice. Get you one of those files, and it spells out exactly what you need to do. Especially, I found through the years on the insurance side, a new carrier getting into the business starts off typically with 1 or 2 drivers. When it grows to over 10, all of a sudden it's normally handed off to the wife or somebody to understand safety, which they've never been in before, and you're creating a train wreck for yourself. So you need to make certain whoever you hire in safety, they understand the rules and regulations. You know,
or who give the responsibility, in this case, safety. They probably didn't hire that wife, they inherited her, but she's still there, daughter or something like that, not being that, but somebody in the office there who's not on the road. Yes. As they expand, you always look at the first place you look is family members, do that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's worth your investment. Insurance, retail agents, you need to understand the insurance business, and this is a key part. What does it do? What does it take to onboard a driver? And that you find out, because that's what's going to be looked at. The other thing is you want to keep everything out of the driver qualification file that doesn't have to be in that driver qualification file, like discipline actions or warning letters or even bonuses, things like that. That's got to be in a separate file. All right, buddy, I interrupted. Talk about the drug and alcohol testing.
No, yes, sir. Now, normally they'll create a personnel file versus a DQ file. And you gave good advice there. Keep those things that's not a requirement in the DQ file out of the DQ file. Drug and alcohol testing records. There again, if you get an on-site or off-site audit, they're going to want to know the consortium you're using, or if not, you know, if you're not in a consortium, are you compliant with the drug and alcohol testing rules? And a lot of carriers typically are on a quarterly basis as far as their random selection. As well as alternates are chosen in the event a driver is no longer with you. There's no wiggle room with drug and alcohol records. You've got to be spot on and perfect, and making sure that you're 100% compliant with the drug and alcohol testing rules.
And this includes 2 new things that happen. I hope everybody who's listening to me understands it's happening, because we published it as much as we can. Now you have the new drug clearinghouse that has to be reported to, and more important, as of this year, the tests have gone up from 50% of the workforce from 25%. And I wonder, buddy, how many smaller motor carriers didn't even know that, who are trying to do the drug testing on their own. Folks, if you want to do your insured a favor, something that they will appreciate, you need to look around, and if they're not in a drug consortium already, to manage their drug testing, and then Insured buys into allowing that drug testing program, or to that outside drug testing company to manage their drug testing, they're asking for trouble. And so agents, you need to screen them, find them, recommend them, and put those 2 parties together. Buddy, I think that's critical.
Absolutely. And most of your smaller carriers, hopefully by now, as long as this has been a rule, should be in a consortium program, you know, somewhere. And I know when the rules changed January of this year to go to 50%, I would hope that those consortiums reached out, and I'm sure they did, to let those smaller carriers realize now it's going to be at the 50% test rate. You know, and one of the problems I've seen through the years, when they provide that list to the consortium, they need to check it twice to absolutely make sure every driver is on that list, because I've seen DOT through the years offer some hefty fines when they discover they failed to include all CDL drivers that should be included on that list.
And by the same token, take the ones off that have been terminated. Record of duty and support documents, that's the logs?
Uh, well, the logs, yes, a record of duty status. The logs, supporting documents, things like trip sheets. I've seen DOT go through the files, dispatch records. Supporting documents would be, like I mentioned earlier, actually asking for the access to the driver's cell phone records and shows where the the towers pinged to prove that the driver falsified their logs. So there's a ton of supporting documents out there that DOT knows where those documents should be, and they'll ask for them. I've seen through the years, DOT typically when they come in, or again, off-site audit, they want to see the top 5 or 10 of your highest paid drivers, as well as your harder worker drivers, those that's really pushing the threshold on the hours of service, okay? And they'll start scrutinizing those drivers because they know they're probably going to find some violations there.
Then not everybody's going to be hazmat, but they're hazmat here. And they had a crash, they got to have a record. And that crash doesn't mean they're at fault. That crash doesn't mean it was preventable or non-preventable. It's if there was a fatality, meaning somebody died at the site, an injury, somebody had to be removed by emergency from the crash site, or one or more of the vehicle that be towed. They got to keep a record of that. Now, buddy, this is going to be the concern I have, because those officers, when they get that letter, they're going to ask for this information, what, within 48 hours to be proof of this? How many of your insureds even have their smaller motor carriers? Think about this, agents, 5 or 6 trucks. How many of them even have all this in order where they can scan it, if they know how to scan it, and send it to the DOT officer within that time frame? That's going to be a real problem, I think.
It's a challenge, and driver vehicle inspection records and maintenance reports. This is so critical as well. You've got to make certain.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to skip over that.
Oh, that's all right, no problem. But in the industry as a whole, we're seeing a lot what I consider a little sloppy vehicle inspections, pre-trips, DVRs, post-trips, and that's what flags you, and that's what flags a DOT audit. So make certain, the drivers really need to do a thorough pre-trip, before they get out on that road. We understand things can always happen, but man, if you're sitting on behind the scales and out of service because you have a headlight out or something like that, that's a costly headlight by the time they have to dispatch somebody out there to fix it.
I agree with you. Now, all right, here's the stuff. What will motor will entail? Depends on the reason for the audit, meaning because of roadside or crashes or not. Depends on the type of audit. Again, it's focus, safety, or compliance review. The DOT officer will provide a list of items requested that motor carrier scan we talked about again, and provide within that 48-hour period of time. So you got to talk to your insureds about this as an agent to make them aware of this. What will it be part of the enforcement after COVID-19? Buddy, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you think? You think this is going to be something they're going to find so effective from a safety standpoint, they're going to extend it beyond the current environment?
I sure do. There's only so many hours in a day that DOT officers work. And I think when FMCSA really gets their arms around COVID-19 is a bad situation for everybody, but the good that may come out of it is FMCSA realized that they can get more production from their officers in checking more trucking companies out there and get the unsafe trucking companies off the road.
And that's their main objective here. Also saves money. Folks, how many of you as a company, agent, how many of you as an insurance company are having less travel and finding you're getting your job done as efficiently and you're spending far less money? And you can actually do more paperwork because you don't have that drive time. The FMCA is going to find that too. And so here's the reason I want to bring this up. I thought this would bring everybody. Yes, we're here now, and we think that's going to go away. But some of the things we learned because of what's happened now will continue. And so this is a concern we have. So what's the process presumed to continue as currently being practice. That would be what our suggestion is. What does an underwriter need to know about these changes? The new entry must be audited within the first 12 hours or 12 months, and that might lead to more of a rating, would you not think, Buddy? Or can they even rate them in that first 12 months for a new entry?
Yeah, well, typically, you know, they give them the bare basics as a new entrant, what they need to have in place. And it's rule now. They must be audited within their first 12 months of being a new entrant.
Either remotely or on site, mainly remote.
Either way, absolutely. And it could have devastating effects on that new entrant if they failed to have a DQ file in place or accident register or be in a consortium for drug and alcohol. You know, so there's going to be consequences to that negligence.
So this, to bring this down to what we're saying, if you write new entries, if you write people who just get their DOT number, you have to give them that stuff we talk about, driver qualification file, send them up the consortium, all that, because they will be visited or have a remote audit within that first 12 months. And if they don't have everything in place, then they can have those fines. Those things could be, fines and other things could impact them greatly. More smaller motor carriers will also have remote audits and or remote compliance audits that could lead to more investigations and penalties. And also my concern, Buddy, is conditional unsatisfactory rating, may need conditional. And the reason I point this out is how many we have insurance carriers who won't insure a conditional motor carrier. And it might just be because they didn't know what they had to do, as you pointed out. It had nothing in what might be missing, like the MVR is not current in the file, and or they didn't keep their logs for 6 months, and or they didn't do the random drug test with 2 trucks. It probably doesn't have a whole lot to do with crashes, but if they get a conditional rating, it's going to affect their loads and it's going to affect the insurance, Buddy. This is why this is so critical. At least that's my estimation.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. It will have a major impact. Number one, with the reinsurance treaties, you know, through the years, most insurance companies have reinsurance behind their paper. The reinsurance treaties outline by guidelines what they will allow to be quoted or not quoted. And I'm hearing now there's more and more reinsurance treaties out there that will not allow you to quote a carrier that has 1 alert, much less a conditional rating. You know, so it's important to understand that.
And as insurance pricing going up because people losing money, the 2 choices that they talk about in all the studies that we're reviewing later is you got to be more selective of who you insure and you got to get more pricing. Being more selective by who you insure talks about all this kind of stuff. So this is why it's so important. Buddy, retail agents involvement. Let the small motor carriers know about the increased chance of being remotely audits and the compliance review and make them prepared for that.
Yes, sir. One thing we do have in place now is carrier software. We've added another feature to our program. It's called Enhanced Safety Process that we actually will help any size carrier, especially the smaller carriers, understand the regulations, how to get things set up properly before they grow too fast, too quick, and it gets out of hand. So, you know, we're here to help. There's a lot of carriers, there's a lot of companies out there to provide assistance. There's no reason to have to run in the blind these days. It's going to cost you your company. And
it's very low cost, if anything, if you're a carrier software agent, because of that special relation with carrier software, because of doing the not only the leads, but the other things we're doing with this other stuff. At points they need to address with their insureds, importance of paperwork that meets these requirements, simply paperwork. Plan ahead, have all required documents in order. Then if a letter is received asking for information, motor carrier can respond within 48 hours. And the 2 areas that I believe, and I left one out here, Buddy, we don't need to change, we can add it, just make a note here. Setting up the driver qualification file and the drug testing requirements, also the maintenance files. That would be the 3 files,
yes,
but not, Buddy, that would be required to be sent.
Yes, sir, and the accident register.
And asset register, those four
Yeah,
things. Okay?
they'll want to see that accident registered. Make
And
sure
how to, that's if they've had an accident. The other one has to be. And then how to set up the records in case of an audit, meaning have any order and purge them when needed to be, but make sure the information is there. Retailers need to keep up with insured activities. And this is the thing this is Tommy Ruke's carrier software innovation. And this is the monitoring program. This is alert monitoring programs. Motor carrier will check, monitor the DOT fleet. They also look at the vehicles and the numbers on the vehicles here. And this will give them, every time they get a crash or get an inspection, the retail agent will know about it. Buddy, this is how the system works, is it not?
Yes, sir. We actually push this to the agents that, in their list of clients by the DOT number. And so it's a great tool.
Provide, by the way, for you, not computer. Go ahead.
yeah, provide. But yeah, we push that to them. There's a lot of the smaller carriers, for example, out there that's on a scheduled vehicle policy. Well, you know what? Our system will identify for the insurance companies as well and push those specified vehicles that are not reflected on the policy. And that's a great tool to use. It's a bad thing to have a vehicle on the road and on a scheduled vehicle policy, the company failed to report it.
And this is the Tommy Ruke beating Craig up here. Folks, you can get all this information, get on top of this, so you can get ahead of the insured when you think they might get these inspections or these remote inspections or full compliance visits here. And it's $10 a DOT number a month. That's the cheapest thing you can get to be on top of this stuff. So if you're going to write, and this is my opinion only, for hire interstate motor carriers, you've got to keep up with this information, however you get it. This is just something that I have convinced carrier software early on to provide to our insureds and to our agents, so you can provide it to your insureds. You can even brand it that way.
Yes.
So, buddy, here's your contact information. You're the expert in this area, and you will assist the retail agents with the insured if that retail agent is a part of your program or the insured's a part of your program. And the cost can be negotiated depending on how much time it needs. But this is critical to get to. And in the closing comments we have, buddy, and I'd like your 2 cents here. Your insureds are going to have a more difficult time to get loads, almost impossible, and get insurance if they get a safety rating that is not at least satisfactory or left unrated. And with these remote inspections now that can be compliance, that can lead to a score, I think they're going to be more compliance review, and more of your insurers are going to get a full compliance review and end up with a rating. And I think we need to get ahead of the curve so we don't face these conditional ratings. Buddy, you've got a couple of minutes or a little bit. This will close this out.
Appreciate it. Yeah, a word to the wise. The time to start improving your CSA scores is 12 months before your next renewal comes up. I'm getting a lot of calls from agents and trucking companies that said, my renewal's coming up in 2 months. How can you help me with my scores? Well, it's a little too late to do that, because your scores affect a motor carrier for 24 months. They drop off the 25th month, and because of the time weighted values, the most recent 6 months is 3 times the weighted values. So you can drop off scores the 25th month and that only had one time. So it's so critical. Engage with your prospects, with your current clients. We have a report called the Snapshot Report that actually agents can see this report, see how their clients are stacking up with any alerts, what it looks like, safety ratings, MCS 150 updates, things like that. And be proactive, man, and start creating that bond between you and either a prospect or your current client, that you're on their side. You're there to help them every step of the way to get the best pricing possible.
I hope everybody here has had an opportunity to hear me say this. And if you haven't, and this is the first time, again, I'll say it again. Our whole dedication for the Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation is that if you want to be involved in providing insurance to these motor carriers, you've got to offer more than the policy. you got to offer more than a price on a piece of paper. You got to help them run their business, because most of these small motor carriers just aren't equipped to deal with today's world, and that's going to be the core part of your business. So please understand that this is a part, when they pay you their premium, they need this kind of help, and it's one that I would hope you all would assume for that. With that said, this is going to end this month's truck stop. I'll remind you that these truck stops are presented the second Thursday of each month. If you need more information, please contact the MCIEF offering that we have, and that's our membership and our designation, things like that, or follow us on Lincoln. To that end, buddy, I hope you have a good day, and thank you for your time.
Tommy, we appreciate you allowing us, Carrier Software, to participate, in your webinar. And we certainly wish everybody the best out there, and if they need us, they just call us, and we're happy to help them any way possible.
So everybody stay safe. We're out of here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, sir.